Welcome to this event, which is called In the Name of Love. Or actually love, not love. Love conquers all, and that's a motto central to our culture and its Christian heritage. Yet Buddhists think of love as an obstacle to enlightenment. Nietzsche went further and called love barbaric, for it is practised at the expense of others. Is love for all an illusion? Might we be better to see love as a dangerous force that by its nature excludes others and gives rise to conflict? Or is love for our closest, our family and tribe, all that really matters? So I think this is what we're trying to get at, really, this conflict or potential conflict between the idea of loving one person at the expense of others, or whether a more kind of all-inclusive, comprehensive love is possible. Right, our speakers. To my left, Phillip Blond, an Anglican theologian and a director of the ResPublica think tank. He's the author of Red Tory, How Left and Right Have Broken Britain and How We Can Fix It, which is an argument for a radical new way to fix a broken country. To my left, and the costume gives it away, doesn't it?
Thank you.
Helen-Ann Hartley is an Anglican bishop and academic, and the first woman trained and ordained as a priest in the Church of England to become a bishop in the Anglican Communion. Her most recent book is Thinking About the Bible. And last but not least, on my right, Mark Salter, a consultant in adult general psychiatry. Mark, he's a media expert at the Royal College of Psychiatrists and has worked as a broadcaster for BBC and ITV. I'm going to come to you, Mark, first, if that's okay. Your opening thoughts on this notion, is love for all a dangerous illusion? Is it possible to love one person as well as lots of people? What are the costs and benefits involved?
Okay, well, first of all, you've got to start out with defining love. I think it's the most important thing. And probably the best way of putting it is anyone here who doesn't breathe? Well, that's kind of an obvious question, but is there anyone here who thinks of breathing or oxygen as an appetite? Do we have an appetite for oxygen? If you ask about appetite for food, it's quite clear we know what we mean by that term. And I'd like to say we have an appetite for oxygen. The problem being that if we're deprived of it, we're dead within about 3 minutes. And I would say that we have an appetite for love, which is no less fundamental. In other words, it's a biological thing. It keeps us alive, it keeps us ticking. Sure, Darwinians amongst us will tell us that it's good for reproduction. It helps to love the person you, excuse the word, shag, which is another word for intercourse or reproduction, another fundamental biological process. But there's no doubt about the fact that love is essential. Problem is that love is not a noun. We're using the word noun already. It's a process, it's a force. But actually the fact of the matter is that love is a verb. A verb, it's something you do. When you turn something into a noun in our Western civilization, you get into a lot of trouble. The word community is a noun. As a psychiatrist in East London, that can either mean living in a urine-soaked cardboard box, or it can mean living in a well-staffed care home, or living with your loved ones. Community can mean different things depending upon the power of the noun. Similarly with depression. It's a thing that's treated with Prozac. No, it's not. It's treated with love. Community is built with love. Community is built with this biological force. It needs refining. Because it's a verb, it's something we do. It's an action. And like farting and breathing and suffocating or singing or dancing and walking or defecating and all the other things that it means in this gloopy mess of being a human being, we can get better at it. And if we work at it, if we devote our lives to it, then you don't have to have a one noun fits all model like so much of our world does, because we can damn well do it for the one and the greater. I haven't got time to talk about attachment theory now. Hopefully we'll come on to that, and I'd like to mention John Bowlby, but the important thing is that it's an equation where love equals 1 + 1 equals greater than 2. Good love means that the individual is synergistically attached to a person and is better for it, but remains an individual for all that. You don't merge into each other. That's crucial. So my answer to your question, very simply put, Robert, is I think, yes, one can perfectly coexist. Love for one can easily coexist with love for the all, as long as we do it skillfully. That's my point.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So love's more of a verb than a noun. We can work on it. And it's essential but not reducible to biology, I think is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Helen-Ann, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Did anybody watch the Eurovision Song Contest last Saturday? Anybody admit to that? Well, I did. The Danish entry was a song called Love is Forever. And the next day I was preaching on a text from John's Gospel where Jesus says, "A new commandment I give to you, that you should love one another as I have loved you." So I think the idea of, is love for all a dangerous ideal? Yes, it is. But perhaps in a classically Anglican way, I might add a but to that. Because it does depend, as Mark said, on how you define love. And the foundation narrative that I would base that on is the collection of books that make up the Bible, which are many and varied, written by different authors over a vast amount of time and history, many different contexts, and containing different sorts of words for love. So I'd want to ask that question, what exactly do we mean by love? By far and away, the most common word for love in the New Testament is that word agape, which has to do with community rather than self. But the idea of love being a dangerous ideal really is summed up in this symbol that I wear around my neck, the cross. And a parable that Jesus told in the New Testament is the parable of the prodigal son. Maybe you've heard of it. It's kind of one of these stories that's pretty common narrative. Two sons, one spends all the father's inheritance, goes away, has a lot of parties, etc. The older son is a bit annoyed about this because the younger son basically squanders everything, comes back, is received with great celebrations, and the older son kind of goes, "That's not fair." Well, the point of that story, and the point of love in a way, is to say it's not fair, because it does involve huge vulnerability and risk and cost. And in a sense, you can't have an assertion of love without having that shadow side of risk and vulnerability and loss. So yes, love for all is a dangerous ideal.
Thank you, Helen. Yeah, so love for all is a dangerous ideal, and it makes us vulnerable, creates risk, but the Bible perhaps gives us some clues as to how to manage that. Thank you very much. Over to you, Philip. What's your initial take on this?
As a philosopher and theologian, I always find one of the most successful ways to think is to imagine what the world would be like if the quality you were talking about didn't exist. Adorno called it the power of the negative. So in almost anything you talk about, it's worth thinking, well, what if it didn't exist? Or what if the proxy for this word didn't exist? What would the world be like? What I think is interesting about love is we don't realize its absolute foundational importance. I'm going to talk about love ontologically, first of all. What ontology means is what is, being. And there's a very interesting point in Greek philosophy. The first interesting point about Greek philosophy is, why did it end? Why did it stop? And the last great Greek philosopher was Plotinus. And Plotinus, as philosophy, was what's called a henology, hen being the Greek word for one, where out of the one sprung the many and all things. And St. Augustine said of Plotinus that he could never explain why the one was not satisfied with itself. Why did the universal create all these things that shared in the universal? And this, in the way, is the question to put to Plato and Aristotle. And Plato and Aristotle all agreed there were universals. So this is the great insight of Greek philosophy, that there are things called universals. And in Plato's Sophist, Plato talks about how universals don't exist outside of their examples. So there isn't a world where there's just an archetype of a horse. There's a world in which there are thousands and thousands of horses, and we know they're related, we know they possess horseness, but that horseness doesn't exist apart from its examples. Now, why this matters is because, and why Christian philosophy ultimately triumphed over Greek philosophy, but triumphed not in the sense of subjugation, produced a new and I think true hybrid, is it can explain why there are many things that also share one thing. And that explanation is love. What love does at the most foundational level is explain why there are more things other than one thing, And it also explains, or attempts to explain, the relationship between things.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.